There were a lot of things that we, my brother and I, Bob, admired our dad for. A lot of things that we admired him for, like he was really good at shooting pool. He had been a hustler back in the day. He was a great shooter, and it was very hard to beat him, if we ever did. I don't know. He was very good at card games of every kind, euchre, pinochle, you name it. He was really good at stuff like that. He was a cement finisher, working man, had massive forearms, just strong man. We admired him for a lot, and he was a fighter too. I mean, he grew up back in the days where you were kind of two-fisted, and he used to race, street race cars. I mean, this is way back in the day kind of stuff, but we admired him for all that kind of stuff, right? But what we didn't admire him so much for was his basketball playing prowess. He had to make up for this lack of existing talent and skill in basketball in some way or another, and the way that he did so was by employing something that I have termed geriatric undersized technique. Geriatric undersized technique, or GUT for short. You'd make a move. Now, I'll demonstrate this for you because I'll do this in slow motion so that you can see it. Otherwise, you'll never see it. So I would start to make a move right with the ball. And if he was guarding me, he's between me and the basket. That's where you're supposed to be, right? Facing me, right here, okay? I'd make a move right. And instead of doing like we were taught to do in basketball, that is, move his feet to stay in front of me, to cut me off, redirect me, or at least stay between me and the basket so he's there to maybe block a shot. He didn't do any of that. He didn't move his feet. What he did was he extended his gut like this. Hey, hey, hey! I am now flying 30 feet back in that direction. The ball is 30 feet in that direction, and the sneakers are still airborne on their way back to China. Gut basketball. Then there was his technique of shooting free throws. Maybe you can relate to this. He shot granny style free throws. Now, Bob and I, again, we were coached. We played basketball all the way through school. We were taught, line up your toe, your knee, your elbow, your wrist and hand, and you just follow through. Get the ball spinning backward. We did all those things, and we were taught to do that over and over and over again, okay? Not Dad. Both feet just like this. Feet out wide, get the ball just like this. And it wasn't just like that. He turned the ball so that when he released it, it was spinning. And if it hit the backboard, it would like suction it into the hoop. And he was pretty good at shooting those free throws. We made fun of him incessantly when we were playing 21 for this. But when we played horse, it was a different story. You know horse. Whoever shoots before you, if they make their shot, you have to shoot the shot from their spot that they shot it. And you have to shoot it the way they shot it. So when Dad shot grannies, now we had to shoot grannies too. Man, this really doesn't sound good, does it? Shoot grannies? Some of y'all would have been an endangered species back there. But there we are in Indiana shooting grannies, lining them up one after the other and shooting them. And then there was his height, the lack of which he would commit any foul necessary to compensate for. We used to particularly zero in on the short length of his legs. Because, you line him up next to my brother. And it's not that, Bob's not Shaq up there, but he's, 5'11", close to 6 foot or whatever. You line those two up, and Bob's legs end up here somewhere. Dad's legs end down there. So it's just... And he would always come back at us with the same response. He would say, they're long enough to touch the ground. That was one of his dadisms. Hundreds of times we teased him about his short legs. They're long enough to reach the ground, as if gravity was somehow, not a thing. But dadisms, and we never forgot those dadisms. He had a whole mess of them, and some of them taught you just good folksy wisdom, and some of them were pretty profound, really, when you got to thinking about them. But years ago, I was kind of thinking through some of those dadisms, and I came up with, I don't know however many are in here, 5 or so, that were, some of his go-to things where he would teach us wisdom in a pithy little way. They're like Proverbs, really. That's why Proverbs are written the way they are, to stick in your memory. And Dad had his dadisms, his Proverbs, and I'd like to share a few of them with you because, one, they have value. They point to the truth, and they form character, but also because I'll bet your dad taught things like this too. And I'll bet this will be a good reason for us to show some appreciation to our fathers today on Father's Day. Maybe it'll even put you in mind of some other dadisms your dad taught you. And you can appreciate him for that as well. So here are some top dadisms from Larry Schultz. Okay. It's better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it. It's better to have it with you and not need it than to need it and not have it with you. Now this came to my attention one time when Dad took Bob and I shooting over at Uncle Jerry's house. He had a large pasture back there. And we were shooting skeet, shotguns at clay pigeons flying through the air and all that stuff. Okay, so we're shooting skeet. And when we took off to go over there, I thought, well, I'm warm enough. I'm fine. I'm good to go. I don't need gloves. I specifically remember thinking to myself, nah, I don't need gloves. I think Dad even might have said, make sure you bring some warm stuff. Nah, I'm good. I go marching out the door. And after about an hour or so of having my hand on the cold steel of that shotgun, and the wind whipping through up there, my fingers were getting frozen. Okay? And I'm like, Dad, do you have any gloves? And he busted out, it's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. Thanks, Dad. But this advice comes in handy for all kinds of things. Work, better have your tools with you. Better to have that tool and not need it than need it and not have it. Camping, fishing, hunting, a great many things in life. Okay, now this strategy could be a real pain in the neck when going to the beach, however. We would fully load up our full-size 1976 cherry red Chevy station wagon, complete with rear-facing third-row seating. See that? This was us, minus the dog, okay? And we would load that thing up for the beach with all kinds of stuff, 95% of which we would never even get out of or off the car to take it down there with us. What would we take? We took a blanket, a few towels, and the grill and the little igloo cooler with the meat and drinks in it. That's all we took. Everything else stayed there to be preyed upon by the thieves at the beach. But every single time, we're packing up. It takes us a day and a half to pack up for a beach trip. And I remember, nagging at my mom, saying, why do we need all this? We don't need this big production. Let's just jump in the car and go. Everything I need's right here, let's go. But she thought, we're going to need everything. Anyway, so sometimes you can take this to ridiculous lengths, but the principle remains valid and true. And it's right out of the Bible, too. Take a look at Proverbs 31 if you want to. Proverbs 31, verses 21 and 25. Bearing in mind, this is about the wife of noble character, describing this wife and mother of her household, because it's not a gender-specific principle. It can be dad or your mom teaching you this. I've just shown you that my mother also lived by this adage. And it says this, when it snows, she has no fear for her household, for all of them are clothed in scarlet. She can laugh at the days to come. Dad taught us to be prepared. Actually, he taught us that too in another way, but it's a little more colorful. He said, don't bring a knife to a gunfight. Same idea. It kind of tells you everything you need to know about my dad. Number 2, work at something you like doing or like your work. Now, it's not so much that he said this over and over and over like as a proverb, but I remember us having significant conversations as we were getting into our teenage years and progressing through, and him talking about this sort of thing. So look at Proverbs 6, verses 6 through 11. Proverbs 6, 6 through 11. Go to the ant, you sluggard. Consider its ways and be wise. It has no commander, no overseer or ruler, yet it stores up its provisions in summer and gathers its food at harvest. How long will you lie there, you sluggard? When will you get up from your sleep? A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, and poverty will come on you like a bandit, and scarcity like an armed man. Now, there are a lot of things you can learn from that proverbial stuff right there. The value of hard work. You can value the value of self-motivated work. That is, will you be motivated and working hard even if someone's not standing over you, watching you, holding you accountable? And a great many other things too. Dad taught us about working harder, but he also taught us about working smarter. Because the older he got, doing all that cement finishing stuff, the more he had to think about his knees and his back and the wear and tear items on your body that really have a hard time with hard work. And so, yeah, we didn't feel the pain. We didn't have problems because we were young and dumb and thought we were strong. And so we would just, bad form, hurry, whatever it is. And Dad was trying to tell us, that's going to catch up with you one of these days, and it'd be better to learn how to save your body so you can work another day too, beyond that. And I didn't understand any of that until I turned about 45, and then everything collapsed all at once. I thought, my goodness, I guess Dad was right. Just the beginning. I'm just looking forward to great decades to come. So Dad embodied this, and he taught us this stuff. He would take me to do side work with him, pouring basements and, driveways and sidewalks and all that sort of stuff. And he taught the value of hard work. He also taught us something about risk-taking, because when he got well into his 40s, somewhere mid to late 40s, he decided that he should switch his career up for various reasons, including the fact that you can only do cement work 9 months out of a 12-month year in snowy northern Indiana, and of course the toll it takes on you physically, all these other things. So he went to semi-driving school. And that's an enormous risk, because while you're getting trained doing that, you're not drawing a bunch of income. So he took this risk to learn a new career. That was at least his third career. I mean, he had been a Bendix factory worker and a cement finisher, and then now he's going to learn semi-driving. And then he did that and was very successful at that. He retired, but doesn't know how to retire any better than some of you all do. And so he's still doing some part-time moonlighting as a semi-driver. But in any case, that became a very important part of his life. So, but sometimes you have to take the risk, and you have to do something like that. Someone once said that the key to success in life is to work 8 hours a day and sleep 8 hours a day and make sure they're not the same 8 hours. Third dadism was measure twice, cut once. Measure twice, cut once. How many of you have ever heard that? Raise your hand if you've ever said that to anybody. Yes. Do you know, we've been, doing a little bit of work here and there lately, and I've thought about this very thing. Boy, you better measure it twice, because if you cut this, you can't take it back. You can't take a cut back. You cut a board too short, there's no such thing as a board stretcher. Though I persuaded my college roommate who was beginning to do a little construction work. I convinced him that there was such a thing as a board stretcher. We were working for the same guy. Yeah, we were building a Nazarene church in Ellendale, North Dakota, and I said, Mikey, go get me the board stretcher, will you? So he goes over the semi, and he's looking all over the place for the board stretcher. He was looking for 45 minutes. He almost got fired for that. No, I'm just kidding. I exaggerate a little. But there's no such thing as a board stretcher. In fact, I had a whole explanation. I said, you know how a board has a crown? If you look down it, it's not perfectly straight. It kind of bows a little bit, A board stretcher just rolls down that crown and just flattens it out, and you get another couple inches out of a board. He was totally sold. Come on, he's my roommate. It was fun. Oh, we were just having a good time. Do you guys bust each other? Come on, you got to bust each other. So anyway, But measure twice, cut once is like look before you leap. You might have had your parents telling you to look before you leap, right? You kind of think things through in advance, prepare, right? Some mistakes can't be undone. Some sins cannot be undone. Some words you say to your loved ones, you can't take those words back. You can hope that they'll forget and forgive and all, but you can't take them back. And so there are so many decisions in life that are life-altering, consequential decisions that it does pay to consider your ways before you act on desires. I remember one time we framed a house. I was working for a framer named Jerry. And Jerry worked, there were 6 different crews, including Jerry's, mine, that worked for Hickey Construction. And so Hickey Builders would have us all out there building. And there was this one crew that built a house right across the street from us, and they were known for how fast they were. They were the filthy fastest crew Hickey had. We were not, okay? We were known for something else that'll become clear in a minute. We went over across the street and inspected that house by that fast crew, and Jerry walked us through it, and he showed us mistakes and flaws in how they did things. In particular, I'll never forget this one corner. It had to do with the tie-in for a stairway and a couple of walls coming together and things. But as you looked at it, and if you thought like a sheetrocker, how would I put sheetrock on this? It was unsheetrockable. It was you wouldn't know how to you'd have to somehow fix that. I know I don't want to get into detail trying to describe what it looked like. I don't remember all of it, but it was just a train wreck right there. And that was just one of the things about that house. Going faster is not necessarily going better. Speed is valuable if you're doing good work, right, Ron? But if you get reckless, it's a detriment. Our crew wasn't as fast as theirs, but our crew chief, for all the flaws you could talk about him personally, he knew what he was doing, and he taught us to do careful work, quality work. That's right. Measure twice, cut once. The psalmist says in Psalm 119:59, I have considered my ways and have turned my steps to your statutes. Consider your ways. And I believe one of the most profoundly important ways to consider your ways is to think about them before the fact and not just after the fact. Give thought to your ways before you act on some impulse. A fourth Dadism was, learn from me instead of having to learn from your mistakes. Learn from me instead of having to learn from your own mistakes. Proverbs 6:20-23 says, my son, keep your father's commands and do not forsake your mother's teaching. Bind them upon your heart forever. Fasten them around your neck. When you walk, they will guide you. When you sleep, they will watch over you. When you awake, they will speak to you. For these commands are a lamp. This teaching is a light. And the corrections of discipline are the way to life, keeping you from the immoral woman, for example. Now, my dad, when he was younger, he was, growing up in the 50s and 60s and all that stuff. Our culture was rapidly changing to a libertine culture. There was a lot of drinking, a lot of, skirt chasing, a lot of stuff going on. Dad participated in that stuff freely as a young man, and ended up throughout the course of those years learning some really hard lessons about consequences, about life, about marriage, about all sorts of things, okay? And he tried to impart those things to us. Now, there are a couple of different ways you could do that. You could do a do as I say, not as I do approach. You could be a drunk trying to tell your kids that they shouldn't drink, and they're not going to listen to a word you say. Dad had given up his drinking ways and taught us, hey, you can get addicted to this stuff, and you can make a lot of really stupid decisions on this stuff if you drink too much. And so he taught us from his experience as a man who is trying his hardest to get it right now. He was trying to teach us to get it right too. And then he'd talk about some of his past relationship mistakes. I remember some really vivid stories he told me about relationships he had and situations he got himself into. And I remember the overall impression from that life was, sure, it sounded like he had some laughs and had some fun. But it also sounds like all of that pleasure chasing led to the greatest crisis of his life, out of which it took nothing less than Jesus to save him and our family. And I remember thinking, I don't want to make the same mistakes he made. Not that I haven't made some mistakes he made, of course. I mean, we both broke our hand punching things, losing our temper. But there were particular monumental mistakes that Bob and I think just decided we don't want to make that. By God's grace, we want to avoid that road. And Dad was smart enough to unpack that for us. Now, he could have just shut his mouth and not told us anything about his experience and just laid down the law and said, this is what you need to do, and that's what you need to not do, and never open up his life to us for us to sort of experience the learning and growth with him. You know what I'm saying? There's a difference between just laying down the law and opening up your life to teach someone something. He could have laid down the law and then we would have known what he expected of us, but instead he told us a story. You want someone to know the truth? Tell them the truth. If you want them to love the truth, tell them a story. And that's what he did. He got us to love the truth and avoid some of the more painful paths he took. And that's just great. That's just great parenting. Mom and Dad both did that. Mom also, she went through in age-appropriate ways at age-appropriate times and processed with us some of the events of their marriage and life and enabled us to learn what we would have never learned if they had not opened themselves to us in those ways. I really hate the expression live and learn. Live and learn. What's the assumption? The assumption is you got to go out there, make your decisions, make your mistakes, and then you learn not to make the mistakes, and you kind of figure out, okay, let's keep doing that kind of stuff. Let's not keep doing that kind of stuff. The whole assumption of Proverbs, and the whole assumption of my mom and dad, because of Proverbs in your Bible, is learn, then live. Don't go out there and just make a bunch of mistakes. Some of those mistakes will alter the course of your life and take you in and sort of, if you act on some of your worst impulses or negative impulses, evil impulses, they can become life-controlling problems that are not easily chosen against. Addictions and so forth. My parents were wise enough to teach us to learn, then live. Try to get it right to begin with. And don't make early, life-altering, disastrous decisions. That was the wisdom of my parents. I appreciate them for that. 5, in various ways this was expressed in our life, more by how Dad lived and worshiped than what he said, but in everything, Jesus should be your number one priority. Jesus should be your number one priority. In Matthew 22, verses 37 to 38, Jesus replied to someone, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. My dad was a pleasure seeker before Jesus. Pleasure was his God. He might have gone to church with his, from time to time. His parents weren't particularly religious, but from time to time he kind of got a religious bent. But for the most part, he served himself and his own desire for pleasure. Just hard-working man, sure, but he was always trying to have fun. And a lot of people in that generation and many generations since have been that. Isn't that kind of what our culture's like? We feel before we think. We'll think after the fact, but we're chasing feelings and pleasures and fun and just trying to have a good time. And that's exactly the way I'm wired too. I mean, that's something that Dad had to learn to restrain in a crisis in their marriage, but I had to learn to restrain it without, say, that exact crisis. I've had to learn that over the course of decades to try to restrain what are you doing over there? Good Lord. Trying to get old people to master their phones is like trying to get, okay. Wow, okay. Maybe. That may be.
Except he was raised with phones and technology.
Yeah, there you go. What Dad did, though, was when he became a Christian, I remember things about him that did change and things that didn't change and things that slowly changed, okay? There were sudden ones, there were slow ones. But I remember, for example, he did not stop swearing just like that. It took him a long time to get a tight rein on his tongue, but he knew James 3. He knew it was important, so, that was something Mom took a long time to stop smoking. Okay, yeah, that takes long to do. Dad stopped drinking immediately, okay? That was cool. That was really cool. But the most dramatic, sudden change in my dad when he became a Christian was he went from serving Larry to serving Jesus first. He was not his own top priority anymore. And of course, putting Jesus first enabled him to more effectively put his wife and kids and family first too. Once you stop serving yourself, you look upward and outward more, and it changes the whole tone of your life. And it didn't take long before my dad got involved in ministry at Outreach Gospel Mission, preaching and leading people to salvation down at the local mission in our community, and being a deacon at the church, and teaching and getting involved in ministry, because the Lord had just utterly changed the whole direction of his life from a me-centered life to a Jesus-centered and then others-centered life. So these dadisms ended up being not just useful at times. This last one in particular is useful all the time. If the whole trajectory of your life is to meet your every desire in the assumption that you'll be happy if you satisfy all your desires, you're just going to be another hedonist who ends up getting to about middle age with your life crumbling down around you and needing to look up from the bottom of the barrel. Okay? And some people don't survive that. Right? They ride the trigger, or they get addicted to drugs, alcohol. They never make it out of those life-controlling things. They destroy their family, whatever it is. Dad made it out by the grace of Jesus Christ. And so he spared no effort, no expense to try to help us with. I showed you guys on Facebook last night. I posted, Happy Father's Day to my dad, and because I came across 4 pictures. I actually got them from my brother's wife's mom. Interestingly enough, pictures I hadn't seen in years, including a picture from when Dad and our former pastor, but Dad was baptizing my brother in the lake on this camping trip. He baptized me that same trip. That's the impact that he had and my mom had on our lives. They not only told us about Jesus, they helped us to live for Jesus from then on. So I hope that this has stirred up. The point of this message was not Larry is great. The point of this story, this whole message, was to stir up your mind to think about your dad and appreciate his role in your life. So that if he's still with us, express that thankfulness. Yes. I know that for some, your dad's not still with you, and it might be sad to think about your dad, but you treasure up the memories of your father. And there's something sacred about doing that too. Because we all know that we're hoping for a grand reunion with our loved ones, right? We're going to see him again. So let us express our appreciation for our fathers, and like Sandra was saying, No matter what your earthly father was like, we also have a heavenly Father who is the model and pattern and paradigm of what every good father is like. Amen? Okay. Now this is